Hey guys, it's Matt Hanham here and welcome to the Amplify Your Business podcast. Matt Hanham here, and this is another episode of Amplify Your Business podcast, and I'm very, very excited to have with me today Kelly Exeter.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
No problem. I am really excited actually. I knew we had a few things in common, and as I was digging a bit deeper, getting ready for this podcast, I found out we had a lot of things in common, so that was really cool.
A lot of people say that to me. So there must be a lot of people like us out there.
Well, I think it also helps when you do a lot of things, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, so for those of you listening, maybe just want to give us a quick rundown on who you are and maybe what you do, and that could probably take the whole podcast, but I'm sure you know, and you've worked on the small pitch version of that. So
yeah, no, I definitely have. No, I'm definitely very much a slashy, so I'm I guess a writer / designer / podcaster / business owner. They're kind of my main ones, other than obviously, mother, wife, runner, reader. Yeah. But yeah, they're the main ones for now. But yeah, it is a very slashy kind of career that I have.
Slashy, I've never.
Yeah,
I've never
you
heard
know
of,
the slashy.
Yeah, no, I get it, but I've never heard it. It makes sense. Writing, okay,
the
slashy,
other one?
but I've never actually heard it put that way. But yeah, look, if you don't have a few slashes in there, right? I don't think you're doing enough.
Yeah, well, it's a whole multi-passionate thing, isn't it? It's like I kind of do dream of being just one thing, and if I could be just one thing, I would just be a writer, but I do get bored very easily. So, and I do love these other ways of, I do love being a designer, I do love being a podcaster, so, so I end up being a slashy and not one thing.
Well, I guess it's all different forms of communication as well,
yeah,
right?
Definitely. Yeah. And I have enjoyed playing with the different forms. So, writing is my preferred form of communication, but I have enjoyed experimenting with podcasting and going, oh, okay, so this is a different way that I never thought I would enjoy, but I actually really do.
It's different, isn't it?
It's very different, but it's so much easier. Writing is so much harder than podcasting.
Look, I'd like to think that I could write at some point, and I really do. I'm keen to write, but time-wise and just the ability, I can talk. I know I can talk, and I've never really considered this as a medium that I would do, but I've been loving this. Getting to just, it's a way to create these conversations with people, and you're right, you can just flow, and it just creates a lot of content off the back of that, and it's just the easiest way to get it out. I've found. Right? I mean, I can imagine. As you're writing and perfecting, and I know what it's like when I'm writing. I'm terrible. Like I'm better off throwing it out to the team and saying, write this down some way, shape or form, not me doing it. But So how did you get into writing then?
How did I get into writing? I think I have realistically always written. So I was a reader from very, very early on, but I think writing has always been my preferred form of communication. So I think, if I had a fight with my parents, I didn't verbally fight with them. I would write them a letter about how I was feeling and what I was thinking, and I would deliver them that letter as opposed to having a conversation with them. So it's always been, it's very much always been my preferred form of communication. But I like it because, it's probably my perfectionist side as well, in that I don't like, and this is where podcasting has challenged me in a good way, I don't like speaking off the cuff because you can't edit your words as you go, so you are forced to say things in not exactly the right way sometimes, and you're forced to live with that, whereas when you write you don't. You can say things exactly how you want them to be said. You get to give them thought and consideration. Even if I'm replying to someone on Facebook, I'm not replying to them verbally. I can write my response and then I edit it. I never type and just go send. I always edit what I'm saying. So that's why I love writing, because I can edit, before I send my communication out into the world.
Right. So was that, going back to the letter to your parents, but is that why you wrote a letter at the time, or was it just comfortable? Were you considering at that, 8 or whatever you might have been at the time, that you wanted to convey your message as succinctly and the exact way you wanted to?
Yeah, well, very much, because I found if I got into conversations with people, especially people who could think on their feet really well and on the fly, which, you know, I guess when you're an 8-year-old talking to an adult parent, like they're a bit more, they're better at that than you. So yeah, so it was much, much easier for me as a, you know, whatever age I was, to express myself in writing, because that way I knew that I was getting all my points across, because that was the other thing I hated, is being in conversation with someone and not getting to say everything that you wanted to say, you know, either because they're a forceful personality or because they talk over the top of you or whatever. So writing meant I got to say everything I wanted to say in the way that I wanted to say it, and also like in a structured format. Yeah. So it's like I would lay out my...
You're setting up the argument
all
the way.
Yeah, that's right. I would lay things out. And it's funny because now as an adult and as an editor, I'm very passionate about structure when it comes to delivering ideas. And even way back then, I was very anal about everything needs to be said in the right order so that the person who is reading this has no doubt as to how I feel about this particular thing. But it was awesome, you know, because yeah, I felt that was my way of making sure I was heard, basically.
Yeah. I mean, did you get letters back? I mean,
no, I didn't get letters back.
What did they do on the collection?
Yeah, no.
Oh, another letter.
I'd get the knock on the door, and my mum or my dad would come in, and then they would talk to me about what was written. So
right.
yeah.
So you sobbed off. The door's closed.
Yes.
And you're waiting for the response.
Yeah, I do wonder, like now, looking back, whether they go, you know, that we would have a fight, and whether they would think to themselves, "Yes, I know what she's doing in her room right now. She's writing us a letter." And I wrote letters for everything. You know, if my mum was fighting with my dad, I'd write a letter to him, you know, telling him how I felt about that. So yeah.
Okay, so it's more than natural, and it started very early.
Very early.
It's your preferred way of communicating.
Yeah, always has been.
Okay, so like you writing books. I know you write books for others. I know you edit. I know you have a design business which does a little more than just design. You know, mum, the whole lot. I mean, what's the vision of what you're trying to do? Even if let's just cut it to the next 5 years, you're obviously doing a lot, and you're quite comfortable being a slashy, you know, as you put it. But so what's the sort of plan in the next 5 years, and where's your focus?
I mean, you know, to be completely honest, the plan is to exit the business and just be a writer. I've always just wanted to be a writer.
Yeah. Does that include writing for others? You want to exit that as well, or do you want to?
No. I do enjoy writing for other people.
Okay.
I enjoy helping other people take their ideas into the world. So I really do enjoy that side of things. So really I just want to spend my days writing and or editing. And so everything I kind of kicked off when I first started writing online about 2010, 2011. I kind of had an 8-year plan. And
an
that
8-year plan, just putting that. A lot of people don't have an 8-year plan, but well done.
It was an 8-year plan because what I saw from I was observing people who had achieved what I was aspiring to achieve, and I saw like to kind of get really solid traction. It took about 4 to 5 years.
It's not quick, right?
And no, it's not quick. And so, you know, and I was happy to play the long game. So, right, okay, it's going to take 4 or 5 years to get really solid traction. And that's kind of where I am now. Like, I've got good traction. But to kind of go that next step where I guess you have a global following and people, you know, people globally know who you are, that's like a 7 to 8 year kind of thing. And it might even be longer now because back then it was much easier to get traction and it was much easier to get attention. And today it's so noisy, so it's a bit more difficult now. That said, I feel like I'm tracking in the right direction, but the ultimate goal is for my writing in whatever format, whether it's my own books, other people's books, a combination of both, to generate enough of an income that I can work school hours, because I've got 2 kids that are at school, and we're financially comfortable. Ultimately, financial comfort is a big thing for me.
Especially if you're trying to create, right? I mean, you can't create when you're under stress.
No, and that is 100% so true. So if you are feeling financial stress, which makes you a bit desperate and makes you, you know, and you're just in kind of grasping mode, you don't get to be creative because you're in this grasping mindset. So I'm very aware of what I need to be, how my life needs to be set up in order to create at the level I want to create. And so I've just, you know, been working towards that over the years. So it's funny, I wrote a post the other day on my personal blog, which was, you know, how I fund my creative life. Because I think a lot of people, see, I have some small measure of success and profile out there. So people assume like kind of you spend your days doing whatever you want and writing, I guess.
It's kind of like having a business too, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you've got a business, you're loaded.
That's right.
Oh, you're a writer? Oh, you're doing well.
That's right. Your money's rolling in, you just get to write all day. How lucky are you? And it's like, this is so far from the truth. We have a business, and that business funds my creative life. And I'm very lucky in that things are set up now that I do kind of have 2 days at home a week to write or work on those kind of projects or work on other people's writing projects, but I still work in the business and work quite hard, and a lot of it, and a lot of my ability to create and write is contingent on the fact that my husband is not sure if he's thrilled about it or happy about it, but yes, he's bought into the vision that eventually my writing is going to pay off in some way. So he drives the business and he does all the heavy lifting in the business and keeping that running well and keeping that business supporting our family financially, so that I guess he's almost kind of investing in my hopeful future success.
I mean, it's how it is, right, in a lot of ways. I mean, whether it's business or writing or anything.
Yeah.
Even to be honest, business is creative, really.
Yeah.
Like, it is. It's just one of those things. You market, you have to do all these things and you have to create something.
Yeah.
It's just different type of format. But you go into it completely in a position of uncertainty. I mean, it's just how it is, and you're always really in some form of uncertainty, no matter what's going on.
Oh, that's what does my head in about business. I think I very much went into business thinking, okay, so you put your head down and you just work your butt off for like 5 or 6 years, and after about 5 or 6 years, it'll just basically run itself, and I can go and put my feet up on the beach and just write.
So most people think that's about 12 months.
Yeah.
Not even 5 or 6 years. But even 5, it's never passive, really. I mean, not proper passive, what the expectation is.
Yeah, there's very few businesses that are truly, I mean, if you have a great recurring income business. So we've got a web, a design business, which is Swish Design, and then we have a web hosting business, which is Swish Online. And the hosting business is as close as you get to something being very nicely passive. And for the most part, it runs itself, and people don't leave unless you do something drastic like lose their website. But shit does happen, and shit has happened in the past, and so even for all that's a great business, it's almost the ideal business, stuff still happens. Yeah,
and like that business as well, they're all the customers are micro customers.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of other things that feed in, and like you can beat that with systems, and I completely agree that's a good revenue, recurring revenue model. But even then, like there's nothing without a major hiccup from here, at some time or other, and certainly the other side, the client work. I love client services and hate it at the same time in so many ways, right?
Because every person's an individual, right? And so, you try to create systems, or you try to create procedures and processes that, deal with every question. You think you've heard every question that's ever been asked, and then someone will come at you with something and you're like, wow, I've never had anyone ask me that before, or I've never had anyone with that problem that I've had to solve before. Okay, let's do this one. And that is exactly what it is. It's never static. It's not a linear thing in any shape or form. It is a genuine roller coaster, and all you can do as a business owner is, try to set your business up so that, in your good times you're putting away stuff to set, to ride out the bad times, because the bad times will come, And I kind of keep thinking, like, can we just go a year? Like, just a year. Like
just a comfortable year.
Yeah, just a year without having to deal with something major. But it's not happened, and I would say I've accepted it, but I haven't really, because I still kind of think deep down I can control the business into being a bit smoother. But I've also, I do sort of accept that, okay, this is just how it is. No business, no matter how anyone. I think the other thing is, now I know enough other business owners where if you only look on the surface and you only look at their life on social media, you go, oh my God, they are killing it. They've got it made. It's so easy for them. And then you talk to them and you find out that it's anything but. And that's not a criticism. I think it's easy to point the finger at everyone on social media and go, oh, you only show the bright and shiny bits and you're not being honest. And it's like, well, That's because no one really wants you to be honest.
I like, well,
to a degree.
I know where you're going. Like I was going to say, I almost disagree, and I don't, because I know what you sort of mean by that, and I like. That's right, because you're sharing something you want to share, and I mean, I think with business, like wherever you're at, you've just got a new, bigger challenge at any point in time. So, in a way, we are almost. I guess faking it till we make it at all times.
Yeah.
Like you every day you're actually really in a new situation, and we just have bigger problems that keep coming up over and over again.
And it's just different problems. It's a bit like having kids, isn't it? Like everyone's like, oh, when my kid's like 4, like life would be so much easier. And it's not. It's just a different kind of hard. And I think that's what it is with business. Is like each successive year, because it's as fast as you fix one problem, another one comes up, and that's just the reality of it is. And if you can maintain your enthusiasm,
that's the
which
key.
Is the hard thing.
Because that's the irony, right? I think we're sort of addicted to it at the same time. So we're addicted to those problems and solving them, which is why we're actually doing what we love, and we're not really not sharing the bad stuff. We're actually not sharing some of the good stuff, even though it's difficult at that time.
Yeah.
We do like to solve these problems, and that's they just keep getting bigger, right?
Yeah, and that's right.
More money, like shorter deadlines, bigger clients, bigger problems. They just keep rolling.
That's it, and it is. It's frustrating, and it's challenging, and it's exciting, and it's all those things. And I think that when you get to the point of like it's just all frustrating and you just want to sell everything or burn it all down and walk away,
need a holiday.
That's when you need a holiday. And you have a holiday and everything is better after that holiday.
And you realise the alternative's not that great either, right?
Oh, exactly. And this is it. A lot of people are like, I think I've said it lots of times to Ant, my husband. I'm like, why don't we just sell the business and go get jobs? And it's like, well, first of all, jobs are no more secure than running a business. And then, of course, you lose all that flexibility. So even though the whole entrepreneurial thing is like, if you own your own business, you get to choose which 80 hours of the week that you work. The reality is there's nothing that, beats the flexibility of it and not having to answer to anyone. And I think just being, the master of your own destiny. Like,
I mean, only you can fire you, right?
Yeah.
If you've got any number of job, like you can, and this is what, like, I don't want to go into a rant on
going on his soapbox now.
A rant into the banking system as an example. But like the fact that you can have a job for 90 days and then go and get a $2 million mortgage or $200,000 mortgage, and then you could lose that job tomorrow versus a business that's, let's say, struggled to get by, but they're still in it 10 years later. I'd put my money on the whoever's the business owner versus the 90-day, the 90-day employee that's just been able to like sneak under the radar, maybe not, but anyway, there's a whole argument behind that, and I just I find that you have the most security but the most uncertainty, I suppose, at the same time. So because you're in control, right? Like it's your destiny.
And you have options. I think when you own your own business or you do your own, you're doing your own venture, you've got much more options than the person in the job. Yeah. And I mean, I've just finished writing a book with James Schramko, which is called Work Less, Make More, and one of the guiding principles in that book is the fact that a business is an asset, but a job isn't. Yeah. And a job is single source dependency. So
you can't sell your job.
No, and someone can take that job away, and if that is your sole source of income, which it is for most people, you're in a lot of trouble if someone yanks that away. Your whole lifestyle is dependent on it, or your assets that you do have are dependent on it. So not trying to freak out anybody that has a job, but jobs are no more secure than businesses. As much as I sometimes go, you go back to teaching and I'll go and get an editorial job somewhere, and life will be so much easier. And it might be, but in one way, but it wouldn't be in another way. So there's always a trade-off. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. We're all looking for that perfect scenario, and it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I just want to quickly jump back into writing just for a minute. Yeah. Just had something that might come to mind. Are you able to really just go and write, like just start writing whenever you want, like whenever you have a window allocated to it? Do you just write during that between school hours type period, or do you then sort of get back on at night and go late into the night and do other things? Or do you know what's I think writing's a difficult thing, and I think people need to be in the headspace to do it. I guess you just write very comfortably, but do you box yourself?
I do. I mostly write in the morning, so I get up very early. I won't say how early, but I get up very early because it's not stealing time from anyone in my family. Yeah. It's quiet, like no one is talking to me, and really, writing is one of those things that it needs your full concentration, and you need quiet, and you need to kind of be in your peak energy. Like I can certainly write when I'm not at peak energy, but it's generally pretty rubbish. Yeah. So I set up my days to allow me to write at the time when I'm most likely to be able to produce something half decent. That said, it is a discipline thing. Like quite often some of the best stuff I write is when I just really don't feel like it, and I always adhere to the just write the first line. And once you write the first line, you're like, okay, I'll write another one. And then you write another, and then the hardest thing is getting started, and that's true of everything, isn't it? Anything that you don't really want to do, the hardest bit is getting started. So I find as long as I have that discipline to write the first line, I can write most times, but I do my best writing in the morning, and I try to set up my days so that the morning hours are for me to write. And then
how do you get the kids to school?
Well, when I say early, I get up in the 4s.
You've been super early, right?
I get up in the 4s, yeah.
Okay,
and
so you're writing that time of the morning.
Yeah, so 5 to 6 is kind of my key writing time most days. Like I kind of, I don't get up, roll out of bed and straight onto the laptop. Like I do have to kind of ease into the day. So I give myself time to ease into the day. I check my email before I write. Like I know everyone will be like, aren't you meant to like not check email until 11 o'clock in the morning? But I can't write if there's stuff in my inbox calling to me. So because I am a bit of an email junkie, I do like dealing with it and getting out of there. So I go on Facebook, I dick around on there for a little while. I check my emails, make sure there's no little time bomb sitting in there, and then, file things away. And then at 5 o'clock, it's like I'm ready to go. And then there's nothing kind of niggling at me, going, there's an unread email in your inbox. Maybe you should go read that.
No one's really sending them at that time either.
And that's right. No one's calling you. No one's trying to send you emails. The only problem is that my kids right now are getting up at like 5:20 and 5:30. It just kills me. And I'm like, you guys, this is my time. If you don't talk to me, you can get up, but you must go straight to the living room and watch TV. But my daughter always comes in for a cuddle first, and it's like, I love this cuddle, but it's really kind of interrupting my flow. But yeah, that's it. I just think, if it's something that's important to you, and writing's super important to me, you've got to make time for it every day. And
so you just write like 1 hour a day, or do you? That's just a consistent thing. You just sort of roughly write 1 hour a day.
Yeah, and it could be anything. It could be blog posts. It could be books. It could be editing work. It could be editing for someone else. But that's kind of my peak writing time. And what I've found is also people in your family are much more willing to let you do something if you do it every day than if you do it only every so often. Like although something like writing is something a lot of people are like, when I have time.
Which never happens.
You have to make time. And if you make time for it every day, people are much more respectful of that. Like my family knows, don't talk to me in that period in time other than my daughter coming in for a cuddle. But if it was something I did every so often, they wouldn't be respectful of it because it's not it's not part of the routine. It's not a habit. So, yeah. Right.
So you've been writing since you're a little kid, and then you go and do a science degree. Do you want to tell how do we get there, and then how do we get back to writing? I guess is the question.
It's fun. I mean, I love sport. Yeah. So I've always loved sport. I've always done a lot of sport. So I decided I wanted to work in sport, and the way to do that was via a human movement degree at UWA. My
wife actually did human movement at UWA.
Oh, did she? Yep. Yeah. So that's where I met Ant as well. Okay. So at least the human movement degree. That makes sense
because I know he likes sport.
Yeah. So it was good for something. We met each other there. But so I wanted to work in sport, so that was my pathway to do it. And I did work in sports admin for about 18 months, and then kind of realised I was competing in triathlon at quite a high level at times, so it was a bit difficult trying to leave work on time every day to go and train, when sports admin is like you're working all funny, weird hours. So even from there, I still didn't go to writing. I went from there to design. So I decided to, I'd always loved doing design. I was self-taught in all the various graphic design programs. So I went and retrained in graphic design and went and got a job in that. And writing all through that was something I did as a hobby. So for the Triathlon Association, I managed their website and I wrote race reports and I did their newsletter and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of kept my, finger in the pie that way. But yeah, it wasn't until I was, kind of burnt out and virtually having a nervous breakdown that I kind of came back to writing.
Yeah, okay. So I think we're saying goodbye to Facebook, are we now? So goodbye.
Bye-bye, Facebook. See you.
And you can listen to the whole thing later. That was more than a few minutes.
Yeah.
So, okay, interesting. So obviously very athletic, training a lot. I mean, if you're training at high level like triathlon, you're doing a couple of blocks a day of 2 or 3 hours at least.
And I think that's it. It's like training for triathlon and working full time, which is what I always did. Yeah. Did not leave a lot of room for any other hobbies. Yeah. So like I said, I still did a bit of writing, but it was for the Triathlon Association. Yeah. On their website and stuff. And so it really wasn't until I quit triathlon that I suddenly had now time to do more writing and
So when you say you quit and moved into writing, I also heard in there some burnout and some other things. So I think there's obviously a bit more of a story around that. And
well, it was around that time. So I quit triathlon and it was probably a year later that I started my own business, my own design business, because I had been working for a marketing agency as a graphic designer, and then and that whole time I was training and working, and there wasn't room in my life for anything else. And then I'd had like a little freelance business on the side of that, and when I say freelance, it was
doing
free.
Stuff for free for friends and family who ever asked.
That was, and and it was because I loved that. Like design was a hobby, so I did love doing stuff for friends and family for free, and be able to help them out and do something that I enjoyed at the same time. But so and so I guess when you do enough of that over the years, then people start referring you to people. And so what I found was kind of around the time, about a year after I quit triathlon, I started getting more inquiries from like genuine businesses who were paying money for me to do things, and so so I started working, and then before long, I was working every night after work and working on weekends, in addition to my job, and I kind of realised, oh man, like I always intended to start my own business, but thought it would be something we would do when we had kids. But it
because that would be easier, right?
Yeah, I know. I don't know what I was thinking, but that was the plan. But it kind of reached this critical mass of inquiries where it was like, I can't keep, working all weekend and every single evening in a job. It's just too much. So it was, so it was quit my job and go out on my own and see how it went. So I did. And it was one of those very safe risks because the place where I worked were like, well, we don't really want you to go, but okay. But if it all goes pear-shaped, you can come back. And I was like, sweet. That's
Good way to walk out. I mean, have that opportunity, sort of half opportunity, but to have that in the back of your mind, right?
It was I knew I had to get out of jail free card. And also, like, we had this tiny little mortgage that back then seemed like mega, but right now I'm like, what I would give for that size mortgage. And, and Ant was working full-time as a teacher, so we knew that if I made no money, we could cover all our costs. But, it went really well. Within 3 months, I was, making the same as I was in my full-time job, and things went really well from there. But, and then about two and a bit years later, Jaden came along, and I hadn't really set the business up to run without me in it. So I didn't have any time off. He was born on the 31st of July, and all our invoices went out on the 1st of the month. So I was and I was the person that did the invoices. So I was sending invoices from hospital on the 1st of August, and people were like, what are you doing? And
that's the bit that some of the employed friends don't necessarily see, right? Like, I've done a lot of work from next to the hospital bed, and you can't just switch it off. Like, I've got some friends now, some great friends of ours just had a baby this week. Yeah. And he's literally got off that to support, the family as well. well till I think after New Year's from now.
Wow.
So, but that's like a clean break. Like he's there if a phone call's needed, but apart from that, it's basically you don't have like. Whereas this doesn't stop, right? Like
Oh yeah.
The next day's pretty intense though.
Oh, it was but I don't know. You're kind of sitting there. It's not really. You've got a newborn, so all the baby is doing is sleeping. So it wasn't that much of a drama. But once I got home, like I was pulling the 7 till 11 shift every night, and every time he went down to sleep, I was on my laptop sending emails and trying to catch up, and it wasn't good. You kind of like, people go, well, how did you do it? And I'm like, I don't know, you just do what you got to do. And so I was doing what I got to do, but after 18 months of that, there's lots going on. I had a friend who worked very closely with us. He committed suicide.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was a pretty terrible time, and I was having miscarriages. Like I'd had 3 miscarriages in a kind of a 10-month period. So things were pretty average, and then eventually, and it was funny because in all of that is where I started my blog. Because what else do you do when you are stressed out and you have no time on your hands? I think obviously I think I was looking for a creative outlet that was no pressure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That had nothing to it was just purely for pleasure, because I don't think I was doing anything at that time purely for pleasure. So I started blogging. And so that got me writing again and reminded me how much I love writing and how much I love connecting with people through writing. And it's kind of...
So was that sort of a conscious decision, you think, to sort of, like, you've sort of separated yourself from the business in terms of the two brands. And so if it started from that blog, at what point did you say, look, this is the right move to build this brand sort of sideways of what the design company and the online business is doing?
Yeah, I think probably the realistic break happened when I had my breakdown, and it coincided with Ant being on long service from teaching. Okay. And I really just wanted to do the whole sell everything we own and go live in a shack and yelling up kind of thing. Like that's always my preferred. I'm a runner. I like to run away from problems if I can. And Ant's a stayer, and he was like, well, I don't know, this is a good business. You're just not running it very well. Why don't you let me take it over and you go home to recuperate? And I was like, you can't run my business. He was a teacher. He didn't know anything about design or anything. But he had been growing this other business on the side, so he did know how to run a business. And, of course, he stepped in and he made it a good and profitable business. I thought he'd be like in 3 months going, yeah, I'm done with this is dumb. But no, he made it a good business, and so he's been running it ever since. So I think basically from the time because I kind of stepped out of the business, like we let our clients know Kelly's stepping out of the business, she's not well, she's got to go home and she's taking time out. So I took 3 months away from the business, and that was good because that just provided enough of a break for people to not disengage me from the brand, but at least realise that Ant's taking over from now and he's in charge and he's the one laying down the law. And from that point on, I kind of quite consciously stayed away from being the face of the brand, because I knew that I didn't want to go back to having that close association. I knew that eventually I'd want to step away completely, and so that's what I've kind of been slowly trying to diverge things ever since.
Okay, so how did you build that brand then on the side? I mean, what did you do?
My personal brand?
Yeah.
Just very organically. I mean, for all that I'm a planner, I'm also very organic in how I go. So I kind of know, I always know what the big picture is, and I knew that the big picture was one day I want to be writing books and I want people to be buying those books, and that was my big picture. Yeah. And it's like, well, okay, so what do you do to achieve that? You just be relentlessly helpful. And, so I just started writing in the self-improvement space, which is where I knew I wanted to be writing books. I listened to what people's problems were. I tried to address those problems. I shared my own problems and, the ways that I had managed, the things that I'd done to overcome them. And so I've always taken very much, and this was conscious, I never wanted to tell people what to do. I never wanted to place myself above them and go, I know more than you, or this is all you do and then you'll be right. Like always wanted to be that person that said, look,
this is how you 10x your life right now.
Yeah, exactly. I did not want to be that person. I just always wanted to be the person that said, look, I've got this, I had this problem. You might have this problem as well. Here's what I did to solve it. If that is helpful to you in any way, then take it. And if not, then, no worries. So that's always been my attitude. And I think people do say to me, when I check in with them about what is it even that you like about me? And they're like, we like that you don't assume that you know who we are and what our problems are, and we like that you don't tell us what to do. You just offer very gentle, here's what worked for me, take it or leave it, type of scenario. And so that's always been my brand of I've had problems and here's how I've solved them. And we all have problems, and take what you can from what I've learned. And I guess that's the other thing, is I love learning, and I am kind of a real information junkie. So if I find something that I find interesting, I love that I have people to share it with, basically. Because you know how, if you have an interest and none of your friends do.
I do.
Do you know that?
I do know that one.
Have you ever come
I do
across
consume a few things myself, and there's a random wall of stuff behind me, which is just like, I'm just going to chuck this stuff up there. This is like a lot of people. What are you talking about? What do you mean? My closest friends have very, very different interests to me, apart from the sports and other things, which are pretty common. And I'm a big sport fan, but no, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
and that's it. That's what I love most about having the blog, is that everyone who reads my blog speaks my language, and I know that when I talk about if it's interesting to me, I know it's going to be interesting to them. Whereas a lot of my friends are like, that's interesting to me because it's interesting to you, Kelly, but it's not interesting to me on a personal level. And there's only so much you can talk about it before my eyes glaze over. So
no, I don't very much know that. I know that very well. So what impact has that brand had on the business then? Do you think that's helped bring in business to Swish as well? Do you think how has that separation worked, do you think?
Yeah, I actively disengaged myself from the Swish brand for a while there when we, after a series of miscarriages, we finally managed to have our second baby, Mia. And that was blissful because, speaking of your friend who's getting to have till after New Year's off, isn't that lovely? I had kind of always said to Ant, I really want if we manage to have this second baby, I'd really love to be able to not have to work in the first 3 months of her life. If I feel like doing something, that would be great, but to not have to do anything, because that would be so different to when I had Jaden. And I got that. That was such a gift. In contrast to Jaden, who got thrown in his cot, the second he fell asleep, Mia, fell asleep on me. I would sit there for 2 hours while she slept on me. It was just so amazing. But then, so after I had that kind of 3-month period, I felt ready to come back into the business. But then I got swept back into, because I think what it is people are like, Kelly's back. And next thing you know, we were both working full time in the business, and it wasn't good for our family, for us both to be working full-time hours in that business. So I said to Ant, I think I need to get an external role to allow me to still bring in an income, but step out of the business again, because this is not good for our family, which I did. So I got the editorial role at Flying Solo. And at that stage, I kind of very actively disengaged myself from the Swish brand, and I was with them for nearly 3 years, which is a significant amount of time. And then, I end up giving that up mid this year because, ironically, because I'd gone to a conference and they pointed out to me that as much as you love this job, it's not taking you closer to your writing goals, it's taking you further away, which was quite I was devastated. I kind of knew it. But when other people pointed out, you're like, God damn it, okay, fine. So I gave that up, and in giving that up, I've come back into the business, and it's been interesting because, yes, my personal profile is very helpful to the business, but now I'm in a funny position of okay, so my personal profile is very helpful to the business. I want to be helpful to the business, but I don't want to link my personal profile too closely to the business, because ultimately my goal is to exit the business. So it's a very tricky situation.
It is. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess really you're talking about business valuation at that point. Like, and then if you got detached and you decided to sell the business, whether it would be a huge hiccup that your brand was going with it or going away from the business, and someone might want to lock you into
I don't necessarily see us selling the business, but I do see myself stepping right out of it.
Yeah.
And then I worry that if I actively attach my brand to the business and then just step out of it completely when either a book I write for myself or someone else just goes like bestseller and suddenly it's making $500,000 a year or something. Wouldn't that be amazing?
I get the feeling that's going to happen.
I hope so.
You heard it from here first.
Nostradamus on the other side of the table for me. But yeah, it's one of those things that it probably won't even be an issue. So it's one of those things that I'm probably overthinking it, and it probably won't be an issue if and when it happens.
I think you are. I think, I mean, obviously I don't know all the ins and outs, but I think you know that. I think you're just like, it's just like, oh, I don't know, I'm not really sure. But that's really interesting. So, I mean, you've said before you consider yourself an introvert. So what's your advice to other introverts out there on creating content, on whether they need it, for their business? I mean, how would you... put that into perspective. I very much consider myself an introvert in a lot of ways as well. I love doing this. Yeah. But I need to go and sit by a tree for 3 hours after I talk to people all day. So this is ironically, I can put myself in the front of this and it's fun, but then I feel like I always need that to back me up. And I'm currently building a steam shower in my house and things, to just places to escape. I need that escape. So I'm in that boat too, and I'm creating content and I'm enjoying it. But what's your advice just to people generally on that?
I just think that this whole online world and writing and podcasting and social media is just an absolute gift to introverts. Yeah. I am not going to networking functions. I don't like pressing the flesh. I don't really like talking to people face to face. So anytime if I'm relying on...
You like to control it too, right? So you can control what you put out there.
Oh, this is it. So if I am relying on doing those things to make meaningful connections with people, I'm not going to do it. Yeah. Whereas being able to engage with people in my own time, in my own way, which is what social media has allowed me to do, and which writing has allowed me to do, so content creation through blogging. And podcasting is an interesting one because people often think that if you're an introvert, you can't talk. It's like...
There's plenty to talk about, right?
I can talk. I just don't want to talk to someone face to face, as a rule. Or if I do, it's a very, then I need to go, like you said, I need to go sit in a quiet room for 3 hours. So podcasting, when I podcast with my co-hosts, like we're doing it over Skype, and it's tiring but not in the same way. And then you get to put that content out into the world, and then people get to engage with that content in their own time. And then people get to engage with you about that content in a way that you control. So you say, look, I'm going to have a Facebook group and you can come and talk to me there, or you can send me an email, but you're not inviting people for coffee or
Well, look, I agree. I don't go to those networking, because it's full of BD people, and it's like, I don't know that I have any problem in chatting with them, but that's not I want to control where I put my time.
As well.
It's often not, right?
It's not. I don't find it to be an authentic way to connect with people, whereas I feel when people are reading your blog post, and certainly and I think this is where podcasting is so next level, is it's such an intimate medium, like you are in people's ears, but they also can hear your voice. So unlike writing, where it's very hard to create tone and you have to be very careful, when you're podcasting, you're just talking, you get to share ideas that aren't fully formed, because if you're talking to another person, you can bounce off each other. It's such a wonderful medium. And like I said, a lot of people are like, wow, I thought you were and even speaking from a stage, I love speaking from a stage, and people are like, oh my God, that's so weird. And I'm like, I would speak from a stage to 1,000 people over talking one-on-one to somebody any day of the week.
So I don't mind talking one-on-one necessarily, but I'm the same. Like I'm quite happy talking to a big group of people, but I don't get more energy from that. I give it all out, and then I need to go and find my energy back. Like whereas my wife is Tash is completely the opposite.
Yeah.
Like she feeds and drives off people and around all the time, and that's how, I mean, she's from a Polynesian island, and so I think there's a lot of culture that comes through in that as well, but that's where she genuinely gets energy from, whereas I love doing all that and with her or other places, but I'm literally burnt. I've got to go find it.
Yeah, and I think that's the beautiful thing about the online world is it does allow introverts to protect their energy levels, and people are more aware of it now. Like, it used to be that, oh, you're really unsociable, you don't want to talk to people, or you leave the party at 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock or something, and it's like, well, no, I've had fun, and some of my closest friends, they'll say, Kelly, it's so funny, you'll be with us, your closest friends who you are most comfortable with, and you'll be chatty and talkative and all that stuff, and then at some point in the night you just run out. Like, there is, like, you can draw a line on it. Like, at that point you just sit back and you are done. And and it doesn't matter that you're with your best friends in the world. Yeah. Like, you have literally run out of energy and it is time for you to go.
Super interesting, hey? And I think the awareness of that, like not trying to not knowing who you are, the way you can operate best, and sticking to that. Like, a couple of times I've done like 2 podcasts in a day, and that's actually that really burns me out. I had 2 almost 1 hour podcasts in a day, and they were both great conversations, but I was like, wow, this is just way too much. But so I know better, and I have to consider who's coming in and what we're going to talk about, and make sure I space things out, because it's enjoyable but sort of draining in a way, and you're really trying to put into the audio. So
I don't know, and like you said, it's just important to understand that, and then you can do things accordingly. That's why I write in the morning, because I know that's when my energy levels are highest for that. It's where I podcast after school, straight after school drop off, because that's when my energy levels are highest for that. So as much as possible, you can't, it's not always perfect, but and I know that if someone asks me to be on their podcast and they're in the US, like, quite often it's a 5 a.m. phone call, which in my mind that should work really well. I get up in the 4s, by 5 o'clock I should be, they're my most inarticulate podcasts. Like, my brain is ready to write at 5 o'clock in the morning, but it is not ready for my mouth to form coherent sentences. They're and I find it so interesting to see that, like, what my brain wants to do at that time of morning.
It's so interesting. I mean, so have you, maybe we'll just talk about those podcasts. So you've just started a second one, so you want to just quickly run through the podcast and what they're about?
So I've got 2. So one's called Let It Be, which is about more being, or less doing and more being, and that's with my friend Brooke McAllery, who also has the Slow Your Home podcast. That's been on hiatus for a little while because Brooke's released a book and I've been writing a book, and it's just been all too crazy. But I've also got the Straight and Curly podcast, which is not about hair as much as it sounds like it. It is about, it's a podcast for self-improvement junkies, and it's with my friend Carly Jacobs from Smaggle. And that's both podcasts, I love them. I say my podcast with Brooke is like therapy, because she's the opposite to me in so many ways, and she gets me to look at the world very differently. Carly and I on the self-improvement podcast, we're very similar and quite militant about our organisational tips and how we go about things, but we've got a very, very dedicated listenership with that podcast, and it's been amazing fun, and I've been surprised how much I enjoy doing it, because I got asked when I first started working at Flying Solo, they said to me, are you interested in podcasting at all? And I was just like, nope, no way. I'm a writer.
I'm here to write.
Yeah, I'm a writer. I'm not interested in putting my unedited thoughts into the world. But then after I wrote my first book, Your Best Year Ever, I got invited onto a lot of podcasts. Yeah. And probably like the first 2, I was like, I did them both, and then I finished doing, and I prepared, like I had, they sent me questions, I prepared my answers, and I still emailed them back straight afterwards, and I was like, we got to do that again. Like, and they're like, no, it's fine. I'm like, no, we got to do it again. And both of them actually said, no, it's fine, Kelly. And I think, over the course of that year, I ended up doing probably about 10 or 15 interviews. And then once I got over the perfectionism of, the non-perfectionism of it, I started to enjoy it, and I enjoy being in conversation. So when the opportunity came to do these other 2 podcasts, I was like, you know what? I think that would be fun. And it has been. It's been. Yeah, I love that. I've got co-hosts. We don't do interviews because I find them, as you know, there's a lot of research and there's a lot of energy that goes into keeping a conversation flowing and being ready to go with the next question, but always still listening so that you can pick up on something interesting.
Oh, look, I've never interviewed anyone before starting this, and I'm like, how did I just throw myself into this? Like, this is not what I've ever done or do anything like. It's it's really a new skill, right? It's
such a hard skill, and I admire anybody that does it. I choose not to do it because I know how hard it is. I really enjoy just having the same co-host every week, and that person that you get to know so well and you bounce off each other, really well. It's good fun, and the listeners, I think, appreciate. I know that like our Straight and Curly listeners, a lot of them started for the self-improvement tips, but they keep going for the rapport because I think
you build that rapport, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you would, especially with that in that model of podcast.
That's right.
You've got a couple of people talking back and forth, that banter, and I think once they identify with you and they start to get to know you, it really is it's very intimate, right? They're in the ear. I love that the second function. You can be driving, you can be weeding the garden, you can be. I listen to a lot of podcasts as myself because it's a great opportunity just to be listening, and it is like you're having this private. You're not in the conversation, but it is very intimate. And if you're listening to these 2 people that go back and forth, it's really powerful. I mean, it's a really powerful medium.
Well, a lot of people do. They email us and they go like, I felt like I was in the conversation with you, and I found myself actually like answering you guys sometimes, and I was like, well, that's perfect, isn't it? Because that's what I want. I want people to feel like they are part of the conversation, and I always get a kick out of that kind of feedback.
So what's something outside of work and outside of creating content and outside of looking after your kids and, not looking after raising, whichever way you want to put it, but what's something else that you just do, whether it's just for you or something strange? I mean, one recently, there's a gentleman on my podcast who has a few kites in his boot, and he pulls out and flies a kite every now and then. There's a bit of a zen moment. What does Kelly do?
Kelly runs. Yeah. But people already know that. Yeah, well, I was going to say, Matt, like, I write on the internet, so there is, like, nothing that nobody knows about me, I think. Yeah. I wish I had a better answer. I wish I had something fun in the car boot, but I can tell you something Ant does. Like,
sure, that's fine. I know Ant.
He's a woodworker. He loves his wood. He's obsessed with wood, to the point where we drive past building blocks. And now my kids are obsessed with wood, both of them.
And he sees a great piece of wood.
Oh my God!
I could turn that.
The people next door, they knocked down the house, and all 3 of them were next door. And so I guess this is my thing. My thing is like, I like wood, but I don't see the need for our whole garage to be full of it. And he hasn't done anything.
That's my next question.
Yeah.
How much wood have you got stacked up everywhere waiting for a project?
And every so often he tidies up the garage and stacks it all really neatly, and then brings me in and goes, I know you like a clean, neat garage, so here you go. This is my gift to you. I'm like, yeah, but all the wood is still there. And you haven't done anything with it yet. So there you go.
I guess that passes. It's something that relates to you somewhat. It's interesting. Woodworking, that's cool. Yeah.
And also I've given Ant a mention because every time I do a podcast, he asks, did you talk about me? Yeah. So I've talked about you now. You can listen.
That's good. And I think there's something about that, as particularly the online space, and Ant's obviously now completely in that zone as well.
Yeah.
And running's the same, and I've always been a runner my whole life. My dad still runs, tries to run marathons, but gets injured. He's too,
we're too
it is
old
what it
now,
is. Yeah, but there's something about those activities which are just somewhat manual, and just and that honestly can be gardening, or whether it's woodwork of some description, or there's many things. Like, I'll enjoy shoveling sand like these. That's ironically because it's a detachment from everything that's digital, right? Which we've all got, and that's when running is really cool as well. And it's the place where I've made a lot of decisions in my life, is pounding the pavement on the on the footpath, going for a run at night, because that's just where the time that I'll often do it. I think there's if we don't have some of those little habits or those other things that sort of ground us, I think, and center us a little bit, it can be pretty difficult to get, or you can get lost in the headspace of just everything digital.
Well, you need the outlet, and I think I'm lucky in that I already make time. So I write every day, and that is my outlet, and I get that every day already. So I don't necessarily need to go searching for, I write every day, I read every day. Or, if there's something I love that nobody really knows, it's like I love long hot showers. They're my thing. Sorry to the environment. But I do other things for the environment to kind of cancel that out just quietly. But yeah, they're my, so they're kind of like my three like pillars of the day. Like I get to write, I get to exercise, I get to read, and somewhere in there is a nice long hot shower. And as long as I've got those things in my life, I can manage most levels of stress. Yeah,
and sounds like you pretty diligently structure them in. I mean, obviously, so you're getting up, you're getting a few things out of the way, and then you're writing early. It then sounds you move into the kid time, or do you get exercise in there before you?
So I write, and then I exercise, and then it's like, right, now we're into the day.
Now we're into the getting the kids ready for school and all that sort of stuff. And then so you'll immediately then come home and podcast after if it's your podcast.
If it's a podcast.
So you're podcasting how frequently at the moment?
So one podcast is on hiatus, which is not good but good because it just takes the pressure off a little. On the other one, we batch record, so we can record like a season of 7 episodes over 3 weeks. And then we take a break of 3 weeks as well. So it's good. We've got it structured so that it's, we knock them out pretty quickly, and then we just free up. And then because Thursdays are my like favourite day of the week because the kids go to after school care, which they love. Like I put them in there once because
they ironically love it. Like we only send them sometimes. It's like, no, can I go? My friend's in there.
They were just begging to go back, and I was like, okay, well, no worries. And then I picked them up at 4:30, and they were furious at me for picking them up so early. So I was like, oh, okay then. So now I pick them up at 5:30, which means I get like this gloriously 9 till 5:30 day to kind of work on whatever projects I've got going on, and they're my favourite day of the week. But if I podcast, it's on a Thursday morning.
When you say you batch, like how many would you then do a few a day, or would you do like one a day for a few weeks, or how
3.
would you?
We'll do 3 in one session.
So you do 3,
which is full on.
Because they're about 40 minutes, a lot of them.
About 30 to 40 minutes, and it's pretty intense, and I'm pretty shattered after I do that. But then I tell myself it's 2 weeks in a row, it's go hard, and then what that does, and then it means you've got a whole month of Thursdays to just, to write basically and work on. And because I've been working on this book for James, it's been great to have these, like have a whole Thursday to edit or to do whatever needs to be done, and that's just such a gift. So Thursdays are my day.
No, it's cool, the batching thing. That's how I actually got started.
Yeah.
So I did 1 or 2, and then I went to a conference and I lined up, I've lined up 2 the first night, 3 the next night, and I did that. So I knew, and I said, look, I'm going to start just by putting these out fortnightly. So I thought, all right, if I go and force myself and get like a handful of episodes going, I'm moving. Yeah. And that's like, it's that starting thing, right? And so like I couldn't pull back from that. I even had one guy dropped out. We recorded it. It was nothing wrong. He just, the perfectionist in him just said, look, I can't do it. I can't do it. So, okay, no worries. Like we'll drop that one out. But that gave me that head start. And even at the moment, we then caught up, and now at the moment we're a couple in front now, and we've got that structured release date. But you really do, because otherwise you panic. Like we've got to get this done, and then that's the reverse effect, right? You end up having a problem. But it's really cool. So we talked about content. You talked about being a bit of a junkie in PD. So do you consume a lot of content? Is it mainly books, or do you get into sort of vlogs and podcasts a bit? I mean, what are you listening to?
Oh, I do. I read voraciously. I'm funny with podcasts now. I used to have my real go-tos, but then I'd kind of feel like I would get everything that I needed out of those people, and then I'd don't listen to them anymore. Yeah. So I mainly read. I'm listening to a book marketing podcast at the moment because that's where I'm
relevant.
At. Yeah. So I kind of, I go where the information I need is realistically, or, if there's a problem in my life, I look to who's got something to say on that problem. So
isn't it cool when you discover someone new that you didn't know about, and they've got like 50 episodes, it's 3 books or something, and you're like a new one to like get sort of deeper down, and then I get what you mean. Like you've consumed everything there is to offer from this person. You can basically answer any question that they would get asked, and you're like, okay, then it's sort of someone else will roll in over the top. Yeah,
and I do that. I do go full super fan on people, and if I find someone I like, I will literally read their whole blog. I will literally hunt down every podcast interview they've ever done, and I will go hard on them. And then, but then I will reach a point where I'm like, okay, exactly what you said. Yeah. I now know exactly, like, this person asked you a question, I know how you're going to answer it, so it's time for me. And I'm in between, like, super fans at the moment. Like, I don't have anyone to
who was the last one? Who was the last big super fan?
Probably Mark Manson, who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a You-Know-What.
That's all right, you can say it.
Yeah, so,
I think it says clean lyrics on the podcast. But
I've already said dick and shit, so
that's all right. Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
But yeah, so I've read his whole blog, I've listened to all his interviews, I've read his book. He has nothing left to offer me, but there's no one to pick up the pieces.
I don't think he's got any stories unsaid either.
So I feel a little bit lost now because I want to be super fanning on someone. Like I want to just be going hard on something, but I don't have anyone like in my life at the moment, and I'm feeling the lack of it. Yeah. So if you have any suggestions, please do tell me.
Yeah, well, it's always a hard one because then it's like, so who have you sort of gone? Yeah, and it can be personal, and it goes through these phases as well, like where you are, what you're doing.
It's what you need.
Like Ryan Holiday. Do you know Ryan Holiday?
Yeah, so actually I am reading a lot of Ryan Holiday at the moment.
The last one, which was obviously very relevant, but then, going back, and I love Stoicism, and I get into the old Seneca stuff, and like one of my big sort of fanboys moments is probably Tim Ferriss, who then has opened a lot of doors into like other areas and other people for me as well, because he's obviously interview format, but he's interviewed everyone who's like, but then it's the obscure ones that I can get sort of down a path on, which is really cool with him, not just the sort of the big sort of ticket names, I guess, which are really interesting. So because he's very very inquisitive and just goes very deep in things, and I find that really cool. But Ryan Holiday's through him really anyway. Like they're well connected. I mean, they're involved. He launches a lot of books as well, even Tony Robbins and other books and etc.
I have started reading. Like I've been listening to Ryan a lot on other people's podcasts because I'm trying to find out more about like the publishing industry and how it works, and because he also ghostwrites and he edits as well. Yeah. So. But he doesn't. You got to find the right one where he actually gets down and dirty into those topics, because not a lot of people.
No, they're not asking those questions. No, that's right. But have you read Perennial Settler then?
I started reading it, but it didn't grab me. So.
Yeah, I listened to it, so I just kept going through, probably not quite getting grabbed on it, but I know where he's trying to go. I think it's still a good book, but I think you've got to be there, and it's got to be at the right time, and it's got to suit you. So I think contextually he's talking about all marketing and everything, but and he's done a very good job of obviously following his mentors and like Robert Greene and other things behind him, and the way he's structured and uses old stories and everything in his writing approach, which I find really cool. But no, he's he's only a young guy. It's very interesting.
I know, like it kills me. Like I feel like I'm his age, and then I remember, no, you're 40, Kelly, and he's kind of early 30s. Like
he's even 30. He must be just 30 now.
Definitely 30,
but only just
turned 30, and it's like, this is unfair. But you gotta get over the ego thing of that. Yeah. And he's written the book on that one.
Well, it's exposure too, right? I mean, so imagine then somehow just finding yourself under someone like Robert Greene or somebody else changes everything. Like changes your trajectory.
It just fast-tracks everything significantly if you're willing to, if you're able to get there first of all, but then also if you're willing to just go hard and listening to what they're telling you and doing what they tell you. So it's a little bit of luck and proximity involved in all of that. Yeah. Which this is the problem living in Perth, in the world's most isolated city.
Head in hands.
But we do all right for the fact that
Yeah, I mean, I love the city too, but it's it's a long way to do anything else, which makes it difficult. But who knows? Things might change. We might end up on the map with a few more flights from Asia and other things that they're working on. But no, completely, we're so far away from all those things. But Yeah, so if that's, your podcasting, you're obviously really into books. I mean, if you had to take one book, let's say, into solitary confinement and you're in there for 12 months, I mean, what is the book that you would take in that would get you through?
Oh my God, I couldn't take one book. Like, it's I would say, you know what I would take? I would take a very, very fat blank notebook.
I was going to say, you're about to say no.
Because
you need to write.
I would die. I would die if I couldn't write, and I would die if I could only read one book. Like, I probably would literally. I love books. Books are my life.
I mean, how many books do you read? Do you read like a few books a week? I mean, are you
at least one a week?
Yeah. Okay.
Depending on what it is, and I switch back and forth between fiction and non-fiction. Sometimes I just get burnt out with too much information, so I switch back to fiction. I love fantasy and sci-fi. They're my genres, so I flip back and forth. But if you just said to me, no, you can only have one book, I'd go just
fair
kill
enough.
me now.
That's a good answer. It's a good answer. No, I'm interested in that, like with the fiction and non-fiction. I read a lot of non-fiction. I really don't consume any fiction. Not that I don't mind it necessarily. It's just not what's like grabbing at me at the moment. I'm always like thirst for knowledge, and I'm sort of really going down that path. One thing I have found, and I guess that you'll probably found this over and above, is there's so many of these books written by a lot of people that are just at this surface level with a couple of concepts. And I feel like I can read it by flicking through because I've read so many other ones. Now, I'm going to put it out there that you've seen that on steroids compared to what I probably consume. Yeah. But is it just because it's so easy to actually publish something now, and you can even self-publish and otherwise? Like, how do you cut through the noise? Let's say I'm going to write a book. Okay, how do I cut through some of the noise?
You gotta have a good hook, basically. Like, so it's not like you can't write on something that other people have written about before, but your angle on what you're writing about you got to have good storytelling, but you got to have the good hook first. Like, why should people read this book from you? And I think the problem with a lot of books out there these days, and this is the publishing industry that's driving this, the book must be 60,000 words. Yeah. So my frustration with a lot of books out there at the moment is the sheer amount of padding and repetition.
They're just forcing out pages because they have to.
They're just getting words out because the publisher has said it has to be this thick, has to be 60,000 words, get it out. And so I'm reading a lot of books now, and I'm not even getting through the first 2 chapters because it's just like, right, you've said this same thing 5 different ways. Yeah. And I'm very frustrated. Like, this book could be a 20,000 word book, and I think
that might be a good book at 20,000 words, right?
There's a lot, and so this is the thing, and I think this is the beauty. Obviously, a letdown of self-publishing is that anybody can write a book, but I've written crap books, and I think the beauty of being able to self-publish is that you learn a lot from writing bad books. Yeah. That you wouldn't get to learn those things if you had to go through a publisher and they just went, no, crap book, we're not publishing it, see you later. Like, you don't learn anything from that. So I'm not going to bag people for writing bad books and publishing bad books, but but I'm quite happy to bag publishers for publishing books full of padding. Yeah. And forcing people to write more and more words to say something that could be said in fewer words. I think the publishing industry needs to get a little bit braver and allow people to say what they need to say in the least amount of words possible. It's
a really good point, because I think that's right. Because I'll grab a book because there is that hook, and I want to read their story, But you're right. I'm maybe a few chapters in. I'm sort of skimming through it. I'm like, okay, they're just saying that. They're just saying this. They're just saying that. And it's not that it's okay. Like, I'm like, oh, that's validating that, or otherwise it's not the story that's the same. But I mean, one thing I've been doing a lot more lately is trying to read really old books, and because it's all the same stuff that we deal with in a different concept, different time, different innovation, different technology, etc. But it's really interesting to watch how they frame up certain situations and that, and once you're sort of looking at 100 years plus old as well, which is really cool, because we're all just telling the same sort of stories of life, right?
Yeah,
life, business.
Well, the concepts are the same,
conceptually.
but the stories are different.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
And I think like the stories are really key, and the stories are everything. And so I guess if you want to write a good book, the way to do it is to take notice when you're reading something and look at what they're doing and ask, like, I am fully engaged with this book. And this is the thing, like, I haven't been fully engaged with the book for a long time, so when I do, and so Sapiens is probably the latest book that
that's on my short list of one of my next few to read.
It's really good. I mean, this guy's taken a very dry topic, which is basically the history of the world.
Yeah.
And he's just made it interesting because he's just written it. He's not trying to over-intellectualize anything. He's not using big words. He's writing very simply, but his storytelling is excellent. So I'm reading that book going, I am fully engaged. I'm looking forward to going to bed so I can read this book. What is it about this book? And it's just, and it's just
story,
the way
right?
that he frames the information. It's all story.
In a podcast environment, Hardcore History. Have you ever listened to that?
No, I have heard it's good.
Yeah, and it's like he could be talking about a fairly dry patch of a war or otherwise, but he's just got this. And like you're talking like one story or one segment of a war, for example, might be 3.5 hour episodes. But and I remember at one point doing housework, something I was doing and just listening to it, and the story and the approach and how he's telling it just capture your attention.
But that's how humans connect. Humans connect and learn best through story. And it's one thing to say you should do better at selling, then you'd make more money. Thanks for that. But then if you give a story of like someone who wasn't good at selling and they tell you their story about like, but then I learned to do this and then it had this effect, like it's such a totally different way of communicating information. It's so much more powerful. What is it? Evolutionarily, it's not a word, but through evolution we're wired to learn that way. And so that's it. If you want to write a book, you've got to have good stories, because that's what people connect with.
And maybe some good help, right?
Yeah, and good help. kellyexeter.com.au.
Yeah, well, we're getting to that. So look, I've taken up a lot of your time, more than I'd planned, but a couple of quick questions just to finish things off. So what's your favourite Disney movie?
Favorite Disney movie is The Lion King. The Lion King. So much so that we had "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" as our bridal waltz.
Nice.
And now I can't hear that song without getting like really emotionally affected.
Well, that's a good music. I mean, I'm a musician from way back, and the power of music is just incredible.
It's amazing,
to attach yourself to a situation, and that's
it
awesome.
Just transports me straight back to my wedding whenever I hear it, and I'm just like, cool. It was such a good day.
All right, what's the weirdest, or what's one weird app that you've got on your home screen that people should try?
I've got it's called Temi, Temi. It's by the guys that do, you like this app, Matt, if you don't know about it. It's by the guys from rev.com, so they transcribe audio. So Temi, I think it might even be free at the moment. If you talk into it, it will transcribe what you just talked. So this is how I write, when I'm strapped for time, this is how I write blog posts at the moment. In the car on the way to work, I talk out a blog post, it transcribes it like while I'm driving. When I get to work, I've got the transcription file.
That's fantastic. I'll be downloading that immediately. Because Rev's just incredible.
It's so good. But expensive, but good.
If you talk for a long time, it is, But incredible. No, I'll definitely check that out. That's really cool. And it's pretty accurate. It works pretty well.
It's not massively accurate. It depends on how, it depends on how well you speak. If you're kind of like, it doesn't like it, but it's pretty good. It's good enough. All right. So the signature question is, what is the one thing for people listening, small businesses, I think it's my target audience anyway, who knows what my real audience is? This is a podcast. Who knows who's downloading? But what's the one thing that you would say to people that you would recommend to do to amplify or grow their business? Okay, we'll call it being heavily influenced by James, because I've been working with him on his book. But
James
I do
Schramko,
think, James Schramko. I think you've got to set firm boundaries around the hours that you work, and you've got to be quite militant about it, because I think it's very easy for entrepreneurial types, because we like working and we love what we do, and it's very easy to just do it all the time. But the problem is we're never switching off. And the thing is, like, you want to get to that situation where when you're on, you're on. Because when you're off, you're off. If you just work all the time and you have no boundaries around your working hours, you don't get to do that. You don't get time for hobbies. You don't get time for fun. You don't get time for sleep. Sleep's really important, and it's a thing that everybody sacrifices, Matt.
I do my best.
I think holding yourself to very firm working hours, whether you say it's 30 hours a week and I get to choose which 30 hours or 40 hours a week or whatever, but it forces you to be quite vigilant about how you spend your time. So you do a lot less of the time wasting stuff and a lot more of the business building stuff when you hold yourself to that. So,
kids help with that, right? Have you noticed the efficiency skyrocket once you've got kids?
Once you're working a school day, like when I was working for Flying Solo, I was working, the 9:30 to 2:30 school day, and my word, I was highly effective in those 5 hours. There was no Facebooking, there was no anything. It was head down, bum up. But, it was 5 hours of head down, bum up, because it then meant that for the rest of the day, I was there for my kids both before and after school, and that's, a real gift for them. So.
Yeah, exactly. No, awesome advice, and so true. I think so many of us try and think we can just push on and push through. You don't have a good barometer of what your efficiency looks like. You just think that you're just pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's not until you make a couple of adjustments and then you go, oh, wow. Like I really was in a bad way last week, for example, and that's why I didn't get all that done. But you can work less and change those hours, and structure is something that I've been playing with more and more lately, and it's just it's never ending, right? It's just always adjusting.
There's always more to do. Let's be honest, no matter how hard you work, there's always more to do. And the thing is, we do get a bit caught up in the whole hashtag hustle thing, and it's such a load of crap.
As much as I love Gary.
Yeah, sorry Gary, but
it's
no.
But the thing is, he's doing it, and that's but I think there's a difference between hashtag hustle and getting stuck thinking you're doing things versus actually doing, and moving the needle at all times, rather than just being I think we've got this busy thing, and that's I think what's hurting us.
Yeah, it's the hamster on the wheel thing, where it's you can be running your little heart out, but you're not actually getting anywhere. So you just need to be able to take stock every so often and go, okay, I'm running my little heart out. Am I actually getting somewhere, or am I staying on the spot? And if you're staying on the spot, then you got to do something.
Yeah. Well, look, I've taken way too much of your time. I really appreciate you coming in. I guess if you just want to let people know where they can go and find out about you, your blog, your books, your podcast, everything else, and if there's anything, I guess, you want to share at the moment that you're working on that you wanted to share.
So if anyone wants, website, quality website and graphic design services, go to swishdesign.com.au, and if you want to read my blog and read my writing and all my personal stuff, including my editing and writing and blogging and books and stuff, that is at kellyexeter.com.au. But currently working on my 5th book. Overthinkers Anonymous, which
I love it.
is gonna every time whenever the right person hears that book title, they just did exactly what you do and just have a bit of a laugh. So I'm really looking forward to that book. Will be out next year, and I was having a lot of trouble with it, but I finally cracked it about a month ago. So I'm I'm excited now. So
awesome.
Next year, Overthinkers Anonymous. Keep an eye out.
Really cool. All right, we'll link all that stuff up, obviously in the show notes. But thank you very much for being here, and maybe we'll do this another time.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers. Hey guys, it's Matt here, and thanks so much for listening to the Amplify Your Business podcast. It means the world to me that you've listened all the way through, and I'd love it if you could share it with your friends.